Now there's really nothing like going to your vegetable garden, picking fresh herbs and using them immediately in your cooking. And there's so many wonderful herbs available and they're so easy to grow. Now herbs like sage, thyme, mint, fennel, lemon balm and many others are absolutely fantastic. And my absolute favourite is rosemary, such a wonderful herb that can be used in so many different ways and so easy to grow. And in this video I'm going to show you 2 simple ways of taking cuttings from rosemary plants to enable you to grow more rosemary plants for yourself. Now, of all the herbs available, rosemary is one of the most hardy. It's a perennial, which means it will survive through the harshest of winters and just keep producing year after year. And if you let rosemary grow, it can grow into quite large, substantial bushes. And the fragrance and the aroma of rosemary makes it just sensational and one of the most popular herbs. So when selecting a rosemary plant to take cuttings from, always select a plant that is healthy and vibrant. And this plant here is absolutely perfect. Sometimes rosemary plants that have been grown for many years can be very woody and can produce some quite hard branches. And the best time to take cuttings from your rosemary plants is spring through to early autumn, which is where the plant is most active in its growing. And as you can see over here, I've already taken 6 cuttings about a week ago from this plant, which I've planted in compost. And I'm also going to show you another simple method of how to root the cuttings in water. So we'll first start by taking a cutting. Now to take our cuttings, we're going to need something to cut them with. I always use a sharp set of secateurs that I've sterilised first in hot soapy water. You can use alcohol or hydrogen peroxide if you've got some available just to sterilise. And the important reason why you would sterilise your cutters is because if you've got any fungus or diseases you have on the blades from maybe other uses you've made of these, clearly that'll transfer to the cutting, which you don't want. A good set of secateurs or garden scissors is what you'd need. And what we're looking for when we're taking a cutting, we're looking for a stem that's around about 3 to 4 inches long, not too woody, looks healthy and doesn't appear to have any sign of disease or any yellow leaves or anything like that. So on this particular plant there's quite a few cuttings I could take. I am going to take 6 in total for the video. So all I'll do is select an appropriate cutting and then get my secateurs and then nip it around about 4 inches. That cutting's not complete yet, I'll show you what to do next, but we'll put that one to one side and I'll take another 5. So what we've done so far is taken the cuttings from the plant, but they're not ready as cuttings just yet. So what we need to do is take each cutting and strip off the lower branches or leaves, just leaving a few left on top. And if you feel down the stem very gently, you'll feel little tiny bumps in the stem, and that's where the junction was of the leaves. They're called nodes, and that's what we need for the roots. So we're going to do that for the rest of them, just gently holding onto it and just stripping off the leaves as we go through. What you don't want to do is put any stress onto the stem and therefore harm it. So I'll do that for the rest of them and then I'll show you the next stage. So as you can see, we now have the 6 cuttings with the bottom leaves taken off. What I'm going to do now is just take one of the cuttings and just put an angled cut, leaving round about 3 inches of the stem just below one of those little bumps, which is the node, and that's where all the growth hormones will be at that point there. So this one here will be the finished cutting that we're going to use. I'm just going to cut the other ones to round about the same size. And now all of our 6 cuttings are ready for the next stage. Now the first method of rooting these is really straightforward. All you need to do is get yourself a glass or a jar of water with round about 2 inches of water in the bottom, and take your cuttings and place them inside so that they're resting around the edges. It doesn't matter if they're exactly straight as long as they're in contact with the water. And then what you would do is put that on a windowsill, but not in direct sunlight. You want to put it somewhere nice and warm, but not where it's in direct contact with the sunlight. And within about 2 to 3 weeks, you'll start to see roots appearing on the cuttings, and then you'll transfer them into compost. Now, the big advantage of this method is that you will see when the roots start to develop, so therefore you'll know when to take them out and pot them on. I don't use this method very often. I tend to go for the method I'm going to show you next, which is planting them directly into compost. Therefore the method I'm about to show you and the one that I use bypasses this method completely and just allows the cuttings to root directly into the compost. But you can often get quite a lot of cuttings from rosemary, so why not experiment with both and see which one suits you best. Now, even if you start your cuttings in the water like I've just shown you, at some point they will still have to be put into compost. And that's what we're going to do here, is put our cuttings directly into the compost. So in order to do that, we need a number of things. Now, you can use individual pots if you want to, but I tend to prefer using these types of cell trays. They've got a fairly decent depth on them, and I can get 6 cuttings in there in one place. And that makes it just more efficient in relation to where I will store them. Obviously, you're going to need some compost, and there are different types of compost on the market. You don't really need to buy specialist cutting or seed compost. I use a good multi-purpose compost with added vermiculite, which I add a handful into the mix. The vermiculite just allows extra moisture retention, which is perfect for cuttings. But if you haven't got vermiculite or perlite or anything like that, it will still work if you just use compost. You'll also need something to water the seedlings with. I have a converted milk carton here with holes drilled in the top. With seedlings of any description or cuttings, I tend to steer away from using a watering can for watering because sometimes it's a little bit too aggressive in terms of the water flow on the seedlings or the cuttings. And I've also got some hormone rooting powder, which I have here, which I will dip the seedlings into before we put them into the compost. And a little dibber to make the hole for the cutting. So the first thing we're going to do then is put our compost into the tray. So we'll put our cuttings just over here, and what I'm going to do is just get a handful of vermiculite and just sprinkle it into the compost and mix it around, and then put that compost into the tray. Just filling the tray up. Then what I'm going to do is tap the compost down until it sinks. By doing that, you're taking a little bit of air out the compost, and then I'll fill up again just to make sure that the trays are full. Notice I'm not compacting the compost down at all. The reason for that is because you do want air in the compost. If you compact the compost down too much, it can restrict the growth of the roots. So having a bit of air in there is a good thing. And it's likely when we water, that'll sink the compost and settle the compost down further. And if needed, we can top it up with a bit of loose compost. Then what we're going to do, we're going to get our little dibber and put a hole right in the middle of each of our cells. And the reason we will make a hole like this and not just put the cutting directly into the compost is because when we add the hormone rooting powder, if we haven't made the hole, often the rooting powder will get lost as we push the seedling down through the compost. The next job is to put the cuttings in the cell tray, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dip them into the hormone rooting powder. Now the hormone rooting powder, as you would expect, by its very nature has hormones in it, does encourage root growth, and it is reasonably cheap. So although it's not mandatory, it's well worth getting some of this, or you can get some rooting gels as well. If you are using hormone rooting powder, never dip the seedlings straight into the main pot, because if there's some form of fungus or disease or contamination on the cutting, you're going to put it into the hormone rooting powder, and therefore any future use of the hormone rooting powder is going to transfer that onto whatever seedlings or cuttings you're using it for. So always put a bit, I always use a bottle cap here, and I'll dip the end of the seedling, give it a good dab of the hormone rooting powder, and put the seedling into the hole that I've just made. And all I will do then is gently squeeze around the seedling, and I'll top it up with a little bit more compost so it's loose. And I'll do the same now with the other 5 cuttings in exactly the same way. Put them into the cell tray and then top them up with a bit of compost. And here's the final one going in. When we do put these cuttings into the compost, when we are compressing with our fingers, we're not putting lots and lots of pressure to compact it down. All we're trying to do is firm the compost around the seedling just enough so it reasonably stands up on its own. There we have our 6 rosemary cuttings all ready now to be watered. So I'm going to get my watering container here and just give each one a bit of a soaking. There we go. You can see how useful that is. If that was a watering can, it would probably flatten all of those seedlings. It's so simple to make. All you've got to do is clean out the milk container and then drill some holes in the top of the container, and you can have one for yourself. Then the final thing to do is put a label on them. Always remember to label your plants and your seedlings. Otherwise you won't know when you planted them or maybe sometimes what they are. So I'm just labelling this one up. On the back of my label, I'll always put the date that I've taken the cuttings or planted them. Then I have a record of when they were planted. Pop that in. Now the next thing to do is make sure you put these in a location that will help them to grow. One thing you don't want to do with any cuttings, and including rosemary, is to put them into direct sunlight. So you want to put them somewhere nice and warm and cosy, but not where they're going to be exposed to direct sunlight, because that could make the compost dry out very quickly and you'll find that they probably won't be successful. So I've got a mini greenhouse at the side of my house that I'll put these in, that's got a nice area of shade in it, so they will be in there. And I'd imagine that within about 2 to 3 weeks I'll start to see some development or growth on these. When they're large enough, I'll then transfer them into individual pots. And just from these alone, you see I'm going to have 6 new plants, so you can get a lot of new plants just by taking cuttings off your rosemary plants. So there you have it, and I hope I've demonstrated that taking cuttings from rosemary plants is really simple and easy. And even if not all 6 of these germinate, I've lost nothing really by planting them. But I do find that I generally have a good success rate when I do this with rosemary, so I'm pretty confident that these will grow. So I really hope you found the video useful. It's encouraged you to start taking your own cuttings and growing your own rosemary plants. Also, as my channel's growing, I'm always really interested to find out what part of the world people are from that are watching my videos. It'd be great if you could pop a comment below the video and let me know where you're located. Which just gives me an appreciation really for the location of people that watch my videos. And I really hope you did enjoy this video and you found it useful. And if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit and veg and flowers and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. I'll see you all on the next video.